Welcome everyone, Cardinal Cowboy here in the Cardinal Cowboy studio. This is one of the most exciting interviews I've had, and a lot of people might not. Who is this? Is this a famous person? For me, I'm gonna take the hat off for this one. We'll set this over here off to the corner. But yeah, I have had a few very influential people in my life who really made a big impact, and most everybody knows that my father is one of those, and I know Charlie here has heard me talk about my dad for many years, and he passed away about a year ago, and I talk to him every day. But he was a huge impact. And can I talk about how I thought of you as relationship-wise too?
Sure.
Okay. So this was my work dad, really. I mean, I had my father, and Charlie's not old enough to be my dad, so don't get me that wrong. We're both, I don't know how many years apart, but not enough. But he really was like my consultant, like literally like guided me early on in my career. A lot of people don't know how Cardinal Cowboy really is, but this is back when I was 25. And I started Anheuser Busch. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Charlie Yarnall, and we've got a special backdrop we're going to use for our show here, because we're both big baseball fans. But Charlie Yarnall was my boss. They gave me my first big boy job. So when I was starting out at Anheuser Busch, we're going to pick it up from where we took the first interview, right? That was kind of neat. Okay. And because we did a little in the green room testing, we were audio checking and did a pre-run, and I thought that was a great way to start it. So if you don't mind, Charlie, let's tell everybody a little bit about yourself, so they know who you are and a little bit of your background real quick, and whatever you'd like to share. And then let's get into where this all went. I want to share with people kind of what it's like to go through a first big boy job, and who you work with, and how you progress through the system, and kind of where we're at now in the world, and where I'm at, and where you're at, if you share. Because we want to just help people understand from somebody who knows how to do it, how you navigate. From my perspective, this guy knows how you navigate the real world and in the business world. So go ahead, tell everybody a little bit about who you are.
Well, I'll start with college. I went to school at University of Missouri at Rolla, got a degree in computer science. At the time, that was before PCs were even invented. So give you an idea of how old I am and what the computer world was like at that point. But I got a job at Monsanto. I was there for 20 years and doing basically email most of that 20 years. And that was before, when it started, it was before the rest of the world knew that email existed, because Monsanto, IBM, and Amoco basically developed a system called paperless office system, which later became professional office system, or PROS, which was the world's first email system. I was involved in that, did that for 20 years at Monsanto, went to Anheuser Busch after that and managed the email team there, and that's where I met you. You came in to interview one day for a position we had on the email team.
Right.
And remember looking at your resume and thinking, this guy's a communications major, not a computer science major. But after talking with you for a little bit, I thought, man, this guy would be a good fit. You had the right attitude, and anything you didn't know about computers, we could teach you. And so it seemed to be a good fit, and hired you on the spot.
Yeah, I remember some of the discussion we had afterwards. You told me that there was essentially 3 people that came. So, guys, it wasn't like I was overly qualified. We already talked about that. But if I recall, we didn't talk about this before our game prep here for the show, but there was a guy who told you he wanted to use the group to get to the networking group. Yeah. There was a guy that effectively fell asleep in the interview, and I was the third one. So,
yeah, just the right spot at the right time, I guess.
And that's what life's a lot about too. Well, I guess what I really wanted to talk about, this is effectively going to be an entire chapter in my book, if we talked about that before the show, if that's all right with you.
Sure.
And I just felt like, man, I learned so many times. 9 out of 10 I didn't realize I was learning something. There was a lesson there, with the discussion that you and I had, or whatever it was going on, or something I messed up, and you took it to me in a professional way because I don't know how many bosses I've had. I'm not naming any of my other bosses, but this is, and if you want to rank against Charlie, I'll give you the rankings, but Charlie was number 1 in my list of bosses. And I had some other really great bosses. Maybe I should revamp that list and re-qualify, but the one that had the biggest impact, for sure, was you. And that was because everything you did seemed to fit together with regard to how to get the best environment, the best situation, the best out of people. And you had a quote you talked about earlier that you mentioned to me. Do you want to share that with everybody?
Sure. Well, actually, it's from a gentleman named Townsend.
Okay.
And the quote goes, "You can't motivate people. That door is locked from the inside. The best you can hope to do is create a climate in which people choose to motivate themselves." And so that was my focus, I guess, from the time I started managing people. You know, I thought, man, these people, they spend as much time at work as you do with your family at home. So you got to get along. You got to enjoy what you're doing. You got to have fun. And, you know, people kept saying, well, how do you motivate people and make them want to do the job? You can't, but you can create an environment where they want to do the job. And with you, that was very easy. You know, it's like I would sometimes have to ask for people to work overtime or work weekends or evenings. You were always the first guy with his hand up saying, hey, I'll take that. You know, so, I mean, that just, to me, showed, you know, your attitude and helped me think, boy, I did the right thing in hiring this guy.
Well, I'll give you some credit with regard to that, but at the same time, I'll say I was motivated by a lot of people. The money was pretty good. There's a lot I learned. I'll share this story real quickly. I had been offered a job. I had worked at Circuit City. I think that's on my resume. Probably you're like, okay, 1 year ago he was working at Circuit City, but that prior year in between, I was a contractor to Citicorp,
Right.
and they offered me a job at like $32,000. And I thought that was a decent chunk of change, but I'd made more than that actually selling for Circuit City back in the day. They used to have a commission structure that was pretty good. And I'd looked at it now, I'm like, that would be like making $70,000 now compared to what, you know. But anyway,
Right.
So $32,000, and then I'll never forget, I was working for you. I got the job, and I was working there, working support, second level support, because I took a test. My contracting agency sent me down, and I took a test to see my computer skills. And I was self-taught. So I didn't know the lingo. And they said, first level support said, now we'll pass. The second level, there was no test for Outlook and Microsoft Office and as such, but you kind of told everybody just a minute ago, well, we'll give him a shot because he's got some of the things and we can teach him that stuff. I'll never forget, man, I did not know what Microsoft Outlook was other than, and I had it on my resume because it did load. It wasn't like completely unfamiliar, but I didn't really know like the back of my hand. So my resume just listed the applications. So I didn't lie to them, guys. I just said it was something I was familiar with. And I had opened it a few times and plugged my contact. I thought it was for contact management. I didn't realize it was an Outlook email. It was where your emails would flow into. Well, needless to say, I learned very quickly how to use Microsoft Outlook because that was what we had to support.
Right.
But I got in there, and I think I did all right because you kept me around long enough, right? And I'll never forget, kind of the first big jump. You had told me, you said, and tell me if you want to recall this, and without naming names, but I remember you had a review with my contractor. Do you remember that conversation? Do you want to talk about that? Tell me what you remember what you told me? If not, I'll bring it up, but I think you probably remember.
I don't remember all the details. If you remember it.
It was interesting because you came back to me and said, well, Carter, it was really an interesting meeting with your contractor because they wanted to know anything that you hadn't done well. Do you remember this? And so I figured out later what was going on. They wanted to come back to me and say, because they'd come to you and said, hey, can we keep the contract? Is he doing all right? We'd like to get more money. And you guys were like, sure, raise the rate a little bit, whatever it was. $7 million a week or something like that, I think. But it was a definite increase. And then I went back to him after you told me you'd met with him, and I said, and you go, we're kind of interested. And then I go, okay, well, I'm going to go back to him and say, if you're getting more money, then maybe I can get more money. And I went back to him, and they go, no, we found these two things that you did that were not good, and we're not going to raise your rate. And I'm like, oh. And it was like, you named it. I'll never forget this. So you got so many people to manage, but it was impactful for me. And I remember I sat there, and I go, all right, so I showed up late work once because that was like what happened in 6 months or a year. And I think it was like I left the computer on overnight, which some people would shut theirs off, and I left mine on. And you were like, they tried to turn that into something that would be negative and said, I'm like, no, because then I can just walk in and turn on the computer and I'm ready to go. And they said, so that was what they've told me. And I'm like, and this is why you're not getting. So I said, okay, I'm going to try to figure out how to play this game. And I went to Monsanto, or I went to the bread company. And God would have it. There was a headhunter guy, young guy there. And he's like, I'll have you up to $40 an hour this afternoon, or $20 an hour this afternoon, or 21 or whatever. That was 40,000. It was a bit of an increase. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I called back my contracting agency, and they looked around and they called me back and they said, we'll match it. You're good. No problem. I'm like, oh, so it really didn't have anything to do with anything I didn't perform well with. It was really a matter of the money. Like, and that's how it goes. Was that kind of the stuff you had to deal with on a regular basis, I guess?
Oh, way too often, and I hated that part. That was the worst part of managing people, to have to deal with the contract firms and talking salary. Because, I mean, you know, I wanted people to enjoy working there, and obviously if you're making the money you think you deserve, you're going to enjoy it a lot more. So that was important. But you know, I didn't want someone to leave strictly because of money. You know, that should never happen, but I know that it does.
Well, and you did a great job of that. That was another thing you did well, and I kind of figured out where you were put in the middle there. You know, it's like, how do you? So I'm just, again, some people are going to hear this interview or hear this, and here goes Cowboy again bragging about himself and whatever. I'm like, tell me if this is true. I've learned that the people that are going to try to find something negative, they're going to find something negative all the time. That's just the way they are. The people that are positive are going to find something positive, and those are the ones you need to surround yourself with and be closer to those people.
Yep.
And I told my mom, I said, someday I'm going to go back and I'm going to help all those negative people. I've heard other people tell me there's no helping them. Once their brain's programmed that way, it's hard to change. But any thoughts on that?
Well, no, that may be true, but it's a challenge that I think you and I should take on. You know.
Yeah. Well, and that's the point of this video, and this could be transcribed into the book. Like I said, these days I wrote 42 pages in one night towards my book, voice to text. Didn't even realize how much I'd done by the time I did it all. I'm like, and this, and here's the thing I did, and this is what happened. I couldn't believe I messed this up, but I learned from it. And then 42 pages later. So we might do that here with this video, and we're saying that in the video that might be in the book, because we want to help people understand. This is a way to, I don't know how many people recognize it. You read a lot of books, Charlie. I think you've done a few books in your life that were important.
More technical manuals.
Technical manuals. I don't know where you get all your
computer magazines.
But obviously, from a management perspective, ladies and gentlemen, somebody that really made it great to work in his environment. I thought for sure you'd studied all kinds of books. Maybe you just were self-taught or had somebody that was a mentor to you or whatever it was, but did a great job. But the book, you can write a book. I can read a book in Audible in a night or two. And then it came to me, I'm like, if I can read a book or write a book read a book in a night or two that's being read to me that I listen to, how long would it take me to write a book? And it can't be that long because it's like the same thing in reverse, right? So I could do. So if you want to write a book, guys, it's not that hard. As hard as you may think. There's still a lot of editing and other stuff, and that's what we're going through. My book got almost done, and then we got to where the whole shifting in the world came around, and I said, I'm going to wait until this gets done, and then we'll finish this up because there's a lot to be learned from that. But where do we go next? Well, I'll never forget working for you, and I was answering phones, right, second level support, and I'd fix stuff. And like Charlie was, again, I'm bragging again here, but I had a stack of gold stars. And my dad made a point to me. He's like, you got to be careful getting awards. You got to be careful getting, this is long after I got all these from you. But that helped motivate me. And I looked around, nobody else really had many of those compared to what I had. And I'm like, these people are going to hate me because I work hard and whatever. Yeah. And that was one little motive. Anything that you'd say about that? And that's just kind of the way it is? Or?
Well, it's, you want people to be positive. And there were some people that I could give those to, and they didn't seem to care. They would stick them in a drawer or something. But the people that it seemed to help, those were nice motivational factors, I guess. I hate to use that term, but
sure.
But you want people to, enjoy what they're doing and be positive. Like somebody asked me, "What's my blood type?" Be positive, just like my attitude.
Be positive. That's how you can remember it.
Yeah. So, and that's one way to do it is to, recognize people for their efforts, and you were a guy that got recognized a lot.
Yeah, and I just felt like that was kind of like, and not to diminish that, but saying I just wanted to do as hard a work as I could, do the best that I can, and I'd say that should be the motivation for a lot of people, and these things kind of come along to support that. And that's what happened. And I was like, okay, I got a stack of these because I've been doing what you want me to do, right?
Exactly.
And that was cool. So then we progressed to where I'm like, all right, I'm 25, just finished my master's degree, and answering phones, which is not bad for where you're at in that point in my career. But I'm like, I don't want to be the guy answering phones for the rest of my life, and there's very valuable work there that's done there. But I wanted to be the guy who built the servers. And so tell me what you recall. We talked a little bit about this before we came up into the studio in the green room, right?
Yeah.
And what was your recollection of how that progressed and how that happened?
Well, I remember you saying, you know, I want to build servers and manage the system, and it's like, you've never done that before. You know, this is a system that's highly critical to the company. I mean, when Anheuser Busch's email system went down, you know, they were saying that can cost the company $1 million a day. That's not something we could, you know, play around with and let somebody with no experience get out there and play around with. But it's like, you know, we have opportunities where you can shadow other people and learn it, and it's like, if you're willing to do that, and you did, and just picked it up amazingly fast. I think that was the thing that surprised me the most, was how quickly you learned that stuff and how quickly you picked it up. And it made it real easy to transition you into that type of a role.
Well, that's key, and that's another thing we want to share with everybody. I talk about this to people. I talk to groups. We had Wesley Bell on our Cowboy Judge show, and it's on ABC. And I said to Wesley, I know one of the biggest hurdles you have to overcome when you have kids that have gotten into trouble is that now they're out of jail. They're out of trouble. What do you do with them? They go right back to the streets because they don't have any skills outside of, you know, what they learn otherwise to survive. And so I said, what if we put together? I said this on the air, and then we said, all right, Cowboy mentioned it. Now we got to go do it. So I've reached out to him since then, and all of the world changes happening kind of in between there, and so, but even more so towards people. If you get in these computer things, they're catching on, ladies and gentlemen. You should probably think about learning how to use these things. I love my mom. She's got a master's degree. My dad had an honorary PhD, did all but his dissertation, so he had all but D for his PhD. But they were lucky to be able to send an email, right? They could reply to one because there wasn't any typing into where's the @ sign go and the .com. But I love them, but that's a different era, if you will. So you were kind of ahead of the curve because you've been doing that your whole life, starting off I think you're in your mid-30s now or so. But yeah. you've done a great, I mean, so the point was, I said, we can teach people these things. And I applied it to myself. And so when I'm talking about this right now, I'm talking about from a practical perspective that I did it myself. And maybe you knew what I did. I think you might have known, maybe you forgot, but I actually I found out from Doug Priest, or maybe I did my own research, that there's a trial training version. I didn't know what Microsoft Exchange was. I had no idea what that was. I knew Microsoft Outlook, but Microsoft Exchange is their robust email product, right? Behind the scenes that all the big corporations used. So I went and got a trial version, and I bought a computer that back then they were like $2,000, right, for the cheapest computer you could buy.
Weren't cheap.
and I built an Exchange server in my house, and I got a static IP from the company because I found out how to do that. And I was actually hosting emails in my own house. It's somebody I remember from National Retail Sales. My girlfriend worked over there, and I got to know her friend. She's like, yeah, I'll have my little email, make it for this little domain. I set the whole thing up, and she had an email system built for her. And one day it went down. I forget because my computer didn't have a backup system on her, battery backup. She's like, I can't get to my email. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life, but I've learned this stuff well enough. And that's when I got into that level. So where do you think it went from there? Because I want people to understand kind of the progression of how somebody moves up the ranks a little bit.
Well, then it was just a matter of, building a test system in a lab that we could play with to verify that it worked properly before we put live emails on it, so we didn't risk losing anybody's mail, because that was, very important to the company. And that all went well, and so then it was a matter of just working in, doing maintenance updates once in a while, and just slowly growing and getting more and more involved, where up to the point where you were pretty much managing the whole corporate server that
Right.
all the AB corporate folks used.
Yeah, so to be clear about what that was, and this is, like I said, people are going to say, here goes Cowboy bragging again, but I don't care. I was lucky. I was fortunate. I worked hard. Whatever you want to look at it. But guess what, people? If I can do it, so can most all of you. It's just whether you're going to apply yourself and put yourself in the right situation and have the right boss and which means putting yourself in, or when you get the right boss, stay in that position, so where you have these opportunities, and then letting them know that you're interested and what you want to do. But yeah, I remember I was in. They came out with the next rendition of servers, and we had to upgrade everything. And they said, "All right, Cowboy, you're going to be in charge of the new servers, and you got to decommission the old ones and put in place the new ones. And once the new ones are in place, then the first or second level people would take that were all part of our team for the support side would move all the mailboxes over at night or whenever that was, and then they would go from a 25 meg mailbox up to a 50 meg mailbox or something like that. You imagine a 50 meg mailbox, you know how old we are, but that was just a huge migration and issue. And I just remember it didn't quite even really faze me, and maybe that was something wrong with me. Like, here's the responsibility you've got, dude, and if you got a server go down, there's 2,000 corporate level, high level people that make corporate decisions that can't communicate. And I just thought, I know how to do it. I'm gonna get in there and do it.
Yeah.
What's the big deal? So that was it. Where does that go from there for most people? And what you saw with what I had to go through, how you managed and all that?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you're.
Well, I mean, just when you saw me going, now he's the corporate guy managing the corporate servers. That's pretty much where it peaked for me.
Right.
And then I stuck around in that position for like 6 or 7 years. But what was it like? So, and I guess we could even go forward to jump into the next major occurrence within the company. Along those times, we kind of just smooth sailing. I'm getting into my 30s finally, and then I guess let's jump into first off, what were some of the? I'll never forget this, and they made a management change, and this is where people were going to go, and each person's kind of roles just got kind of mixed up, just to mix things up, just to give everybody a different perspective. Yeah. What did you think about some of those tactics or strategies to help make the environment the way it was?
Well, you can't remain static and continue to improve and grow. You got to have change. And so it seemed like sometimes some of the corporate folks went out of their way to create change. But generally it was, in the end, was a good thing. And you move people around, and that gives you new opportunities to learn new things and grow. And plus you get introduced to more people and more opportunities to learn new ideas.
And I think that was part of what happened, because I was kind of like, I was the corporate email guy. Let's reflect on one little incident that happened that I was like, holy cow, this is like the end of the world. And we had, well, there was a few times we had instances, but the one that was probably the most dramatic that I was most involved with. Along the way, I would always volunteer for whatever. I wanted to learn as much as I could. So I said, I'll be the backup restore guy, right? You recall that?
Yeah.
And the backup restore guy, it was a monotonous, boring job. We had some high-level email mailboxes that I won't name any names that I had to restore and get their data back. And but then it was like, okay, so then I was the backup for a transition to it. It was keeping the same systems, but it was a new external hard drive with fiber array attached drives, and they were redundant and all that stuff. And the lead was another gal. I didn't get permission to say her name, so we won't say names, but she was the lead. And her job was to make this happen. And we both tested it in the lab and did everything we needed to do in the lab to get this done, and it worked. And Microsoft, we're on the phone with them. We got a big account with Microsoft because we're a big company. Anheuser Busch, right, king of beers. And there we are, and everything was fine. So we said, well, we do this first batch of migration just for these servers, because the other servers were ancillary out of the breweries and the theme parks, and they didn't have to be as robust, and they weren't redundant. The jobs there, I guess, weren't as critical. And so we have redundant systems, and they said, all right, we're going to move everything we're going to start off with the first batch, which is a clustered pair of servers. If one failed over, it failed. So then you always still had a server up. If one went down, that was called a cluster. Well, we want to talk about a cluster. What a cluster. but no, it was cool because we got to do these things. And it was cool. We had the system in place. So I'll never forget, I worked with the guy who designed the whole thing, and it passed on to us, and we were implementing this piece. And we'd all tested it, and Microsoft gave us the okay to go and do what we did. And I'll forget, we had to do this on the weekends at 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever. So we're in there in the corporate DPO on the 3rd floor and the corporate offices, and I clicked the button because she said, you go ahead and do it. Go ahead, you've done this, you know what you're doing. Click the button, and everything comes back online. And I have to open my mailbox, and I look at my mailbox, and it's empty. Did you remember this one?
Yeah.
Talk about this one from your perspective a little bit.
That was very scary. Basically we did exactly what we were supposed to do, and it didn't do what it was supposed to do. And it's like, okay, Microsoft, help us. And they looked at it and said, it shouldn't have done that.
Right. It shouldn't have done that.
We don't know what happened. It broke. So that was pretty scary, and I could see my job passing before my eyes.
That was one of the most intense times in my life, because here I am as a email wizard at this point. I'm pretty good at all these things, and I'm going, oh my gosh, if my mailbox is gone, everybody's mailbox is done. So we figured it out pretty quickly, and we're looking at the log files, and it says all these things, and we're going, Microsoft's like, yeah, so do you guys have any backups? Oh, so that's when the lead on this project looked at me and said, hey, you're the backup guy. Go get them. Do you remember what happened after that? How crazy that was?
No, not really. I think I tried to block that out.
So now we have and this is where they didn't do the corporate high-level executives, but we did the corporate engineers and technical people. So it was just everybody that made the whole systems work didn't have email at that point. And I remember we changed the policy after that, because there was a time frame of a 15-minute window or something that the backup stopped and didn't start, and we had to do things differently after that. And so there was a bunch of alerts that go across the company at 2 o'clock in the morning still, and those got lost. And it was like 125 emails got lost or something, maybe it was more than that. But it wasn't like 4,500 emails times 2,000 people.
Right.
4,500, whatever, how many, 50, it's crazy. And so I'll never forget, then I'm like, and then she proceeded to say, all right, I'm going to head home. And I'm like, oh. I'm like, I guess that's because I'm okay. So I'll never forget, I'm like, I called, I will say Susie's name. Susie and I are pretty good friends to this day. And I said, called Susie at 6 in the morning after I started getting things going. And I'm on the phone with Microsoft. And she's like, oh my God. Okay, I will come into the office and let's see if we get this thing back up in live in production. And it was insane. And literally, I'll never forget, I did everything I was trained to do. We'd done restore, but just hadn't done. I can say I'm probably one of very few people in the world who've actually done a restore to a production clustered email exchange system. But we did.
Yep.
And I'll never forget, it got to be like 11 o'clock in the morning the next day. And she's in the office, and I'm in the office, and we're working on everything remotely from where the corporate stuff is down the street, but we can check everything and access it. And we looked at each other, and we're like, okay, the backup, the restore is done. Who wants to hit the button to see if it all comes online? I'm like, I'll do it. And it has to go through all these log files that don't get committed to the database yet, and apply those, and they're 5 megs each, but it's this much of a message from one person and this much because they had an attachment from another person, and it makes up 5 megs, and it goes on to the next one. And then it had to apply, I don't know, a gig of those or something, some crazy amount. But now it would be a terabyte or something. But anyway, they applied, and then you're just waiting. You can see the log. It's going, it's putting this log in there. It's putting this log in there. And if it works, then they all come back online. Everything's good. If it doesn't, it says, your information store is offline, and you're still down. And so, like, they were like, this is where we all find out if we need to move to a different country or not, because it was so. And we clicked and watched it, and then everything said online. And Susie and I literally put our arms around each other. We're jumping up and down, hugging each other, going, it came on, we got it done.
Doing the happy dance.
Doing the happy dance. But a corporate environment where there was literally something that was like critical and business would have been stopped. And I guess my message with all of that is a bunch of messages there. But one is, we're all human, and we all got stuff we got to deal with, and some of it's maybe it's a bigger deal than it is, and other things, but it's all just something that you just got to go out and get it done and do your best, and who cares if it works or not from the large perspective. In the big scheme of things, as long as you put all the effort in, you didn't try to slack at all, and if it works, which it should, then you're in even better shape. What are your thoughts on that little incident? Because remember, we had to do restores back, we had to bring all the old back tapes back, and everybody came into the office, and we'd explain to everybody how their email went down.
Yeah, I just remember some fairly high up people being very nervous and doing a lot of pacing and
really?
Wanting to know, how we can keep this from happening again. And that was like, that's something we definitely have to find out. Is how do we keep that problem from occurring again?
And I can think of some other instances, some other crazy things that happen. We'll save those stories for another day. But it all boils down to the same thing. Just we're all on this little plant together. We all want to contribute as much as we can. Some people are motivated. I think you made the point of much more easily than others. And some people have other things they're focusing on or whatever it may be. Well, just kind of got to figure out how to make this whole world work.
Definitely.
Is that a fair way to say it?
Yep, that's excellent.
Well, the last thing we'll talk about real quickly, if you don't mind, and this was another big transition. And this is where I kind of went off in a different direction than most people, because a lot of people. But how long did you know about the fact? Because I worked, my girlfriend worked over at NRS, and she kind of gave me a heads up. She says, Anheuser Busch is going to be bought out. Do you remember that and how that came down, and what was your perspective on all that?
Well, I just, the first time I heard, I thought there is no way. I mean, that's, Anheuser Busch is one of the top companies in the country. There's no way they're going to get bought out by anybody. And so it was a lot of denial at first. But then as it went on and you heard more and more about it, it's like, wow, this is pretty scary. And then when you see InBev people coming in the door, it's like, wow, this is really going to happen. Yeah, it was pretty scary and made it very difficult to keep a positive attitude.
Jump into that a little bit. I mean, I recall, and I think I knew about it about a year before I heard anybody else talking about it, because like I said, she worked in NRS and she had the ear of she was listening to some of the people that were high level saying, we got to do something. What are we going to do? And somebody, no, it won't happen. I heard, they could have done things differently that would have kept it from happening. I don't want to get into all the speculation about all that. But when it all came down, I'll never forget, it was a matter of, here is a decision, and if you got called in at 8 o'clock in the morning, you had a job, and if you got called in at any time after that, they give you a nice severance package, and that was the way this was going to go. I don't recall. Did you stick around, or were you part of those severance?
No, I was part of the first group on, I think it was December 7th or 8th, something like that. It was early December. Yeah, I got called into a meeting and I think I had a BlackBerry at the time, so I had to turn in my company phone and somebody escorted me to my office to clean it out, and it's like, boy, that is not a good time.
Yeah, if I recall, I talked to Jerry Barfield, I'll say his name too, because Jerry ran into me years later. He's like, I remember I was kind of disappointed at one point. I don't want to reflect on this one too much, but it happens as part of the deal. I wanted to be in the design group, and they effectively told me, it says, we don't think that's where your best skills are at, but you can fix any problem there is. You're the crisis type guy. And that kind of goes with my lifestyle a little bit. What do you need? How soon do you need? I'll get it done right now. But the planning thing, as you can see, was not necessarily something that was one of my strong suits. So I didn't get the job. But anyway, I talked to him about that, and I said, what did you think about my time at AB? And he just said, dude, you were awesome. You were the one. We needed to keep you where you were because nobody could fix problems like you could when there was this particular thing or an SMTP connector or something over in Shanghai or wherever, all the different breweries they had. And I was like, wow, I didn't really realize that. And he's like, yeah, don't, you're not good at a lot of things, Carter, but you were good at that kind of stuff. And so that helped me realize, and that's, I think, also another trade secret, if you will, or whatever tip. Go in there and dig into whatever it is you want to learn and learn it backwards and forwards. Don't get too far out of scope, because the master of none, right? The jack of all trades, master of none, doesn't pay the bills so well, right? Yeah. And so I recall that. And then, I'll to finish up with I'll forget when I got the call, and I don't remember exactly when it was, but I believe it was December 13th on the second floor over at Sunset Hills at 2:15 p.m. I'm guessing if that was the exact thing, but I remember very precisely when that all happened. And I was kind of ready to go, because at that point I realized I had more room to grow, and I'd kind of been sitting around for a little while, just kind of enjoying making a very nice salary compared to all my friends. And I remember when I became an employee, there was 50 people that applied, and they only took me and one other guy. Do you recall that?
Yep.
And I was like, whoa, I didn't realize that was kind of the level we were at, but and just benefits and 2 cases of beer and all that stuff. And I was like, man, there's something bigger for me. And I know a lot of people went off and they said, well, they went from Anheuser Busch, big consolidation and moving people to New York and all that stuff, but Monsanto or Scott Trade, and they all would jump to the other corporations. At that point, I decided I wanted to switch, and I did. I go off into my internet marketing world, helping small businesses, and became one of the top guys in the world for that. I might have to have another one of my bosses. None of those bosses had the impact that you had, so maybe they won't make it into the book. But yeah, the number one guy for Reach Local, I will. Dave Simpson is one. He was the guy that got me hired, and I was there for like 2 weeks at Reach Local. But I came in and I became the number one guy for Google's biggest partner. And again, learning the trade, figuring it out. I didn't know what pay-per-click advertising was, even though Google had been around for a few years at that point. But they had a $51 billion in revenue, and my company had 2% of their revenue that they generated, and I was their number one guy after about 8 months or so. And it's just something else that, again, guys, I'm not anything special, but hey, go out and work hard and figure this stuff out, and you can set your mind to and accomplish anything. Is that a fair statement for most people, that if you apply yourself like that?
I think so. I mean, yeah, you got to have some basic skills to be able to learn and grow and continue to get better. So not everybody could do that, but I think with a little bit of determination, it can be done.
I agree, and that's where I get frustrated. People will look at me like, well, you're just really motivated. I know what my IQ supposedly is, and it's not that high. But my dad would always tell me, the smartest people kind of outsmart themselves and think they're so smart, so then they don't work so hard. It happens very often. And so you want somebody who's driven and can at least put the stuff together and figure it out and willing to do that. And I think that's where, guys, if you work hard, you can beat the guy. I talked about this in my speeches. I would try 10 times and fail 9 before the other guy even got off to try it once. And that's just how you win. And then you know the 9 things that cause it to fail, too. Well, you did that, whereas the guy who got it right the first time, he doesn't know what the other 9 things that can cause it to fail are because he didn't experience that. So another cool tip. Well, there we were, Anheuser Busch. They said, here's your walking papers, Cardinal Cowboy. And I'd started the Cardinal Cowboy in 2004. This was 2008. And from a high level, I started the first time I remember I get tickets all the time for my girlfriend in NRS. And she's like sitting behind the dugout right at the Cardinals game at Old Busch Stadium. And I had the hat, and they were calling me the Cardinal Cowboy back in 1998, 99. And then 2004, you guys kind of saw me doing this a little bit around the community. Yep. And then I was like, I got my wings at that point to go off to the next thing. And I was out in the real world. Well, I tell you, the real world, everything is structured and kind of controlled in a corporate environment, and it's pretty well set, and you can count on a lot of things unless a big company comes and buys you out. But yeah, I've learned a lot. So, I mean, that's really where it all kind of went for me, and I was kind of excited. And not to belabor the issue or the point, but ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you guys all have a boss like I was fortunate to have with like Charlie Yarnall, and just to say it again, you really impacted my life in a dramatic way. And I don't know if I ever had the chance to tell you that. I don't want to start crying here, but it literally changed my life. And so when I just thinking the other day, and I had an old cell phone number for you, I called that first, but I still had your son's cell phone number. And he called and told you that I had called, and then you reached out to me with email. And I'm glad I saw the email because I get 400 emails a day. They're mostly garbage. And I saw yours. I was like, oh, Charlie got me back over here. So thank you for responding to that. Thank you for coming into the studio to talk to us today. I know you don't like doing the camera thing a whole lot. There's a lot of people who don't. Yeah. But I've just learned it's kind of a blessing and a curse for me because I do want to get that message out that I've been through, and so I want to get it out in front of everybody. And I nudge my buddies every once in a while. Come on, you got to help me out a little bit here, and you did, and I really appreciate that.
Anything to do to help you out, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Yarnall, a legend here in St. Louis, in my mind, and hopefully, like I said, there are all kinds of legends out there that don't get the spotlight, that aren't on major television, that aren't in big-time movies, but they have huge impacts in people's lives, and Charlie's one of those people.
Thank you very much.
All right, everybody, Cardinal Cowboy Show. Stay tuned for more excitement as we continue. We'll see you guys in a little bit. Giddy up.